When kids just won't listen, parents often feel stuck between two choices: to give in or get angry. It's exhausting. We give you the top techniques directly from the experts, helping you on your path to a more peaceful, respectful, and joyful life with your kids. All the way from South Africa, our guest is Cassandra Treges. She started working with kids as a nanny. Is that a first in the show? That might be a first in the show. And then she started studying child psychology. She keeps herself up to date with the current parenting, behavioral, brain, and child development research and information. She's also a homeschooling mother and has been helping parents to communicate better with their children through home visits, online consultations, and mini courses. Her mission is to help parents address behavioral issues in homes as early as possible so that they can better communicate with their kids, so that kids are better understood and everybody's happy. In this episode, she shares some anecdotes about her son, why she likes conscious parenting, and how to get children to cooperate through connection, and a lot of other helpful parenting tips. So here's our interview with Cassandra Treges. Cassandra Treges, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, James. I'm so excited to be a part of your show, and it's wonderful to spend this time with you and with your listeners.
Yeah, thanks for joining. So what is it that you love most about working with kids?
Sure. So the fact that we can learn so much from them. We are gifted with the privilege of guiding and leading our children, but we can learn so much from children at the same time. We learn patience. We learn about ourselves from past hurts of our own childhoods, and we learn to become better people. And we're constantly challenged because, let's face it, they are always providing us with new challenges.
Yeah. You were saying past hurts there?
Yes. So
okay.
There are so many past hurts from our childhoods. We are almost taught from previous generations to suppress our feelings. Right. The way our parents may have handled certain situations with us that not necessarily wrong, but they felt that they were doing the best that they can, which might not necessarily have been, the best way of handling a situation. For example, in my childhood, my parents taught me, you do not speak to an adult unless you're spoken to. You do not sit with adults at the adult table. You have to sit separate at a kiddies table. Or, you had to go to your room to cry. And, through the years, I learned that, if I'm dealing with feelings, I actually just want to go to bed. And, when you wake up in the morning, it's all gone, which is not necessarily true, because it's, those hurts are deep into your subconscious.
Right.
So every situation that you are dealing with, all of that is really stuck in your subconscious, and you might not necessarily deal with situations the way that you want to. So those are all the past hurts, that we are not always conscious of. But through this process of working with children, I've definitely learned a lot about myself. And really, with dealing with children and learning about their behaviors, you actually learn you're just a much bigger version of a child. And, everything that you've learned as a child, you've taken into adulthood. Right. And that's how you deal with life.
Yeah, I'm finding that's one of the biggest messages that I hear from all of the guests is we're just not that different. Us and kids. and understanding them and communicating with them, although it can feel sometimes like just such an impossible gap and like there are different species, that often has to do with the things that we're not tending to in ourselves.
Right.
That we've turned off, and so we're unable to connect there.
Yes, exactly. And it's, a lot of the time, parents are, shouting at their kids, or, there's so many triggers, and those triggers generally stem from your childhood. They are, my son, for example, he will come and stand on my feet, and a lot of the time I just want to lose it. It's a trigger for me, and that's purely from my mother drilling into me when I was younger. You've got to always have clean feet. Can't go to bed with dirty feet. You've got to have clean feet. So when he comes to stand on my feet, it's almost like I've got to be conscious of not yelling at him, not screaming, just, explaining, please get off my foot. Mommy doesn't like dirty feet. So all of these things from childhood really come rushing back. And if you're not conscious of it, you tend to almost take it out on your kids.
Yeah. And then it repeats, huh?
Exactly.
You're doing a lot of different work. You've got your website, and you have people calling you to talk about what's going on in their home lives, and you're also visiting families in the home.
Right.
So what's that like when you go visit a family? What are the challenges that are maybe unique to being in the home with a family, or what is it that they're calling you about? Could be another way to ask that.
Well, when you are working in the homes of families, you really are in the midst of the chaos. Kids let everything out at home, of course, it's their safe space. So this is really where I see not only children having a hard time with their feelings and their behavior, but parents really having a tough time. And a lot of the time, parents blame their kids for behavior issues, saying things like, my child is always shouting, or my child never does their homework, my child doesn't talk to me, or my child talks back to me, my child never listens to me, or my child is so defiant. And really failing to see the underlying cause for their behavior. So the focus tends to be on the behavior and trying to fix that, rather than focusing on the underlying issues. So when children are behaving this way, it is often because of unmet needs. And also, all of these behaviors are learned. So parents don't deliberately teach children certain behaviors or not to listen, but it usually occurs due to the way parents respond to their children in these situations.
Do you have an example of, if it can be specific or just general, of when a family's calling you and kind of what it looks like for you to step into that situation and what you're usually dealing with?
Right. So a lot of the time, parents are, they generalize. My child throws so many tantrums and I don't know why. Or my child's throwing tantrums because I've asked them to pick up their toys and they have an absolute meltdown about it. So I would definitely say that, when parents contact me and tell me, their kids are not listening, they're throwing all these tantrums when they've asked them to do something, they really, in that situation, make the mistake of repeating themselves. I've asked my child to get dressed 100 times and they're just listening to me. So I really, I guide them through that and how to communicate better, because they make that mistake of repeating themselves. So what I often tell them is, start by telling your child, you're not listening to me. And then, follow through with a natural consequence. So give them a warning. If you're not listening, then this will be the consequence of that. And parents often mistake a consequence as a form of punishment, and they are two very, very separate things. So, and then they've got to follow through with, if they've said this will be the consequence, they've got to follow through. And a lot of the time parents don't. So, for example, if they are not cleaning up their toys, and the parents have told them, please clean up your toys, the house is a mess, and they're not listening, then they purely say, you're not listening. If you haven't picked up your toys yet, unfortunately, I can't serve dinner. So, they go through that process, and, they don't get punished for not cleaning up their toys. A lot of the time, parents just need to step in and just help them a bit, and
right.
And often, they repeat themselves so much, they start yelling to their kids, the kids start throwing tantrums. So what I actually taught my son was breathing techniques. Just before he turned 2, he was about 23 months old, and he would feel himself getting worked up and actually remove himself somewhere close by in the same room on his stool or whatever he could sit on, and he would actually breathe to calm down. So sometimes I'd have to prompt him and ask him if he felt like he needed a moment to breathe. And the one day I had become quite frustrated myself, and it was just one small thing after another that was happening in the day, until I became so frustrated that I said to my son, my boy, just please go to your room. And I completely handled the situation incorrectly, because I should never have asked him to go to his room. But I'm also human and I make mistakes, and all my conscious parenting at that moment had gone out the window. And he responded very nonchalantly, no, I won't. I'm not going to my room. So I said, please, Mom, Mom is feeling very frustrated right now. Just go to your room. And he carries on walking ahead of me and he says, just breathe, And it was a few weeks after his second birthday, and I was so taken aback by how correct he was that all my frustration just went out the window. And because here is my 2-year-old reminding me how I need to manage my frustration. So once you teach your kids all of these techniques and just respond to their needs, it's amazing what you can accomplish.
A lovely story, and demonstrates how true it is that when we say, we can learn this or that from kids, it's like, that's not just something nice that we say. It's they're right there with us and reflecting what we've taught them, and coming up with their own solutions all the time. That if we're just tuned in, they can be great teachers.
Yeah, they really are amazing, because they just absorb so much. They absorb the good, the bad, the ugly. And that's really what conscious parenting is all about.
So a family calls you when they're having, kids having tantrums, for example, and they're out of ideas on what to do, on how to work with their kid. And then you're able to visit the family in person, and you see that, you start seeing kind of the full dynamic of what, there's all types of factors that might go into that you're seeing.
Right.
So what do you address first? How do you talk to the parents or talk to the kid? And how do you do that in a way that's that doesn't get you run out of the home?
Right.
And I know how hard it is. You're on their territory, and you maybe have something to share that might sound critical. So, yeah, what's your secret there?
Definitely. Well, that's exactly the biggest challenge, is that parents, they often contact a professional for help because they feel like their child is at fault or their child's behavior needs to be fixed. And parents don't like to change. So it's definitely, that's what I'm finding is one of the biggest challenges. So what I usually ask the parents is, well, what are their needs? What do they need from their children? Because a lot of the time when there is this sort of environment, it comes down to unmet needs. So the parent needs something, it's an unmet need. The child needs something, that's why they're throwing the tantrums. So that's what I usually ask them, and we talk through that process. And then also, when there is so much disconnect, it's because the kids really need to feel more connected to their parents. So I recommend, whether they've got their special time together, the recommendation is usually about 10 minutes per day. And this is just following, the child's lead in terms of what does the child want to do in that time. So often parents mistake the fact of spending quality time together, going for an ice cream together or playing games and or reading a book together. And although all of that is great, it might not necessarily be what the child needs. So they still have that feeling of disconnect. Parent feels like they're doing the right job and they are spending this time together, and the child doesn't feel that connection. So once we've gone through that process and you feel like the parents feel that they are connected to their kids and that all the needs are met, but there's still this problem of the tantrums and the children not listening. Then I guide them through it, and I say, the parent needs to say, I really needed you to clean up your toys today, and you didn't listen to me. So unfortunately, I can't listen to you right now because my needs have not yet been met. So could you finish what I asked you to do so that I can fulfill your need as well? And then they can also offer to help them or to play a game to get it done. So this often gives them the understanding that relationships are give and take, and it's a two-way street, and it's really about cooperation and not about the parent trying to control their child.
I was thinking about when you talked about letting the kid lead. I have a lot of training and experience in doing kind of play with kids.
Okay.
In therapeutic ways and just hanging out with the neighbors.
Which is fantastic.
And it's interesting when you ask a kid, what do you want to do today? We can do anything. Like you said, going to get ice cream. We can ride bikes. We can do this and that. And they say, well, I just want to play, this little game on the floor with you. And how even that can be kind of a challenge for us because we're imagining going to the zoo and doing something grand, and they're really inviting you to do it their way, and that takes a lot of patience and just kind of letting go of the all the options that we have really as adults, and looking at the options that the kids into.
Right. It is hard. It's very difficult. And just to let them escape, into their worlds. It's, we're always constantly trying to pull them into our world, not allowing us to be pulled into theirs. It's almost like, just because we're adults, we've forgotten that world and we don't allow ourselves to be pulled there.
And, I like to keep in mind that just because I do agree to the game that, playing action figures on the floor, which might not be very exciting for me, and maybe I'm disappointed that we're not going to do what I was hoping the kid would say. Well, that doesn't mean that the adult doesn't also have some say in the play. It's like, you can still, the kid wants you to show up not as a robot, but as a play partner. So even though they're setting that kind of boundaries of the game, let's say, well, they still want you to take what you got and run with it, and to be expressive and be creative in the way that they are. Mm-hmm.
Exactly. And you learn so much through that play from your child. They come out with a lot of what they've heard and what they've heard other kids say. So in that play, you might find out about something that's been happening at school with your child, that they might not necessarily have come out and spoken to you about, because they might not have realized how much it actually affected them. But then through that play and through, playing with these action figures with your child, you've actually realized, oh, hang on, I get what's going on here.
Yep. That's where they're able to communicate, is in the play space.
Yeah, right.
All right. So you're helping parents identify with their kids, what are the real needs. You're saying, what's the need here? What's the unmet need? Because when two people are yelling at each other or ignoring each other, you're saying that the need is often overlooked, or not really a part of the conversation. And so that's kind of what I'm hearing is one of the first steps that you're able to, and by asking the question of the parent, or us asking the question of ourselves, what's the need here? It takes it out of that realm of emotional, this person should have done this, or I'm mad about this. And we're back to using that kind of higher brain of, all right, what's the problem here? What's the need here?
Exactly. And a lot of the time you realize that it's within yourself. So, you think, I need my child, to get dressed right now. Meanwhile, it's more about you. I need my child to get dressed right now because I need to get to work on time. So you start realizing, okay, it's not so much about my child, it is more about me.
And then you also talked about the importance of getting connection with the kid, so that even if you have identified their needs, and maybe that's a good first step to kind of getting on their side, so that they will listen to you and listen to your needs. That kind of freedom, free play, or just kind of letting go of the leash for 10 minutes, you said, and letting them have the autonomy is a way that you can get connected, so that, kind of outside of that more intellectual, now we've identified the problem, but now we still need to kind of make peace on a more person-to-person level. That's how I'm hearing it, at least.
Right. And a lot of the time that will happen when the parents come home from work. So that's definitely when parents are finding it very difficult for their children to cooperate or listen to them, because their kids have spent so much time apart from their parents. So you just by just coming home and spending those 10 minutes with your child and just reconnecting, it really makes such a difference in terms of for them to cooperate and to listen to you.
And then you'd also talked about, giving a fair warning, letting them know what the problem is that you see, and then making sure to follow up with a real consequence that's not necessarily a punishment.
Right.
Such as I can't get dinner on the table until this and this is done, and that doesn't have to be an accusation or a shaming or taking something away from the child. It's just kind of a logical consequence.
Right. So a lot of the time, that's really how our lives are. With every decision we make, good or bad, there will be consequences of our decisions. So what children really learn is by the time they are adults, we need to be at peace with the fact that, you hope that your child will make those good choices and decisions. So, if they make a bad choice, there will be consequences of that bad choice. And that's really what you're trying to teach them, by guiding them throughout their childhood.
All right. So with all these techniques, sometimes it's hard because we're wrapped up in an emotional place or the kids in an emotional place. It's just hard to remember to take these steps. Is there a way that you could summarize it? I'm thinking about something that I can write on the back of my hand, something that is short that will help me remember when I'm in a difficult space with a kid, what steps to take.
Right. So, if I put myself in that situation as a parent, one of the biggest things that comes to mind, and this is why I love conscious parenting so much, is because when we are put into those situations and our bodies go into fight or flight, everything that we've learned from the past is in our subconscious, and that is how we react. So what I have learned by constantly teaching all of these practices is that I'm saying it over and over and over again. So I would just say to write down a script for yourself for each situation that you're having a hard time with, and then read it as often as you feel necessary, before bedtime or in the mornings. So it's really almost an affirmation, but because I teach parents to really be conscious of how you're communicating with your children, a script I find is the best. And then to practice it when you find yourself and your child in that situation, because the more you practice responding to your child in that way, the more that habit slips into your subconscious. And then before you know it, you're not even thinking about how to respond to your child appropriately. You're just doing it automatically. So the great thing is that our kids, they give us plenty of opportunities to practice. So when you make a mistake, you can own up to it. And when you do forget, you can tell your child, Mom or Dad didn't handle that well. I made a mistake. And they learn so much just from you admitting your mistake, and the fact that you are trying to be the best parent you can be.
All right. So you're saying, even if I did have something written on the back of my hand, if I'm not practicing it kind of outside of the high stress situation, it's not likely to become a habit. So practice it with the kid. Even practice it when, you can make a game out of it.
Exactly.
You could have the child's, kind of, it doesn't have to be a secret that you're working on this new technique. And that's when you get to that point where your child can tell you to breathe and can be absolutely right.
Exactly. and I love that you say it doesn't have to be a secret, because if your kids know that you are working on being a better parent, it builds so much of a relationship, between the two of you. So I love that.
Yeah, just kind of raising that curtain and saying, hey, help me out here. And finding opportunities to apologize is another great way to do that. We all among adults, we're always saying, "Oh, I'm failing as a parent. I'm screwing up. And it's kind of like to never have that conversation with a child. That, I mean, not that you would say necessarily in those words, but you can open up a little bit about that.
Right. Yeah.
I think that's a good way to gain trust.
Exactly.
What are some resources that you recommend?
Sure. Where do I begin? Definitely the book, How to Talk So Kids Will Listen and Listen So Kids Will Talk by Adele Faber
Okay.
and Elaine Naslish.
I should get a bell for when people recommend that so I can ring.
Really?
Yeah, it's my favorite. I a few people have brought it up, and the book I've given away the most copies of any book in the world. Got a handful of them on my shelf here, and that's my favorite answer.
Yeah, it's interesting because when I went to complete my certificate in child psychology, I was actually given this book to study. And this was really where my positive parenting tools and practices were born, because it completely transformed the way I the way I worked with children. And it so profoundly enriched all the relationships in my life, because what it taught me was that a lot of the techniques to build relationships with our children can be used with anyone, really. So it's just, a lot of the time it just involves being present and listening. And by us doing that, our kids learn to listen as well.
Yeah, it was a profound with me too. I remember the day I was first handed to me by a supervisor of mine in a children's hospital, and just changed everything for me, really.
Yeah, it's an amazing, amazing book. I've got some other wonderful resources as well, if you'd like to.
Please.
Yeah, I'm sure a lot of the listeners would appreciate them as well. The book Atomic Habits by James Clear, purely because as parents we have so many habits that we can change to help us be the best parents we can be. The Big Life Journal is also doing amazing things to encourage a growth mindset for kids. The book Peaceful Parents, Happy Kids and Peaceful Parents, Happy Siblings by Dr. Laura Markham. She's wonderful. Her website, Aha Parenting, is also amazing, an amazing website with wonderful articles. The Conscious Parent by Dr. Shafali. AFineParent.com also has amazing positive parenting tips and advice. And also Kim John Payne's podcast, the Simplicity Parenting podcast. He also has some wonderful tips on just, simplifying your life to get rid of that chaos. Also, Hand-in-Hand Parenting is wonderful for support. Nicole Schwartz from Imperfect Families is a fantastic parent coach, and her newsletter and blog has wonderful tips. So I highly recommend signing up to all of their newsletters and reading their books, because they provide invaluable tips for parents.
Great. I think you're the first to mention anything about habits, or at least going to pick up a book on habits. And I think that's a great idea. I think that so much of this is really, it's just habitual patterns that we fall into.
Right.
Like you said, some of them might have come from our childhood. Some of them are just, habits can be built in all different ways. But when we look at it from that perspective, and kind of admit that we are all creatures of habit, that's a great place to work from.
Yeah.
And again, it doesn't have to be such an intellectual pursuit. It's often, well, we always play at this time of the day because the bell rang.
Exactly,
it doesn't have to be any technique that requires a lot of a doctorate.
Yeah, and again, it's just so much is embedded in our subconscious, and I must say that's why I work with parents with little ones a lot, because I just find it so fascinating. Kids up to the age of 7, from birth to 7, how rapidly the brain is developing, and so much of your behavior and how parents have, responded to that, that all of these things from a childhood really get embedded into your subconscious and become habits. So it might be so many things that you don't even remember, but you can learn so much about yourself. And once you reach adulthood and you become a parent yourself, you might not know so much, but just by looking at your habits and tapping into that side of things, you really learn so much about yourself. So James Clear is fantastic in teaching all of those principles and practices.
So where can people learn more about your work?
So other than visiting my website, I'm on also Facebook, Instagram, got a YouTube channel. Listeners can sign up to my newsletter where they will be notified of any new updates and resources. And they can also sign up as members where they will be able to download all of my resources completely for free.
Awesome. We're going to put links to all of that.
Fantastic.
And your website is called?
So it's the website is Nanny Knows.
Nanny Knows.
That's it.
Okay. Well, we will, and we'll post the right link.
Perfect.
Great. Do you have any parting thoughts? Anything that you wish we had got around to that we didn't?
I think that so much of our generation is stuck in that authoritarian disciplinary approach. I definitely was, based on the way that I was raised. And, when I first started working with children, I was following practices of other experts at that time who really encouraged things like timeout and punishments and reward charts, even things like distracting your kids, and children today are really, they're not allowed to be heard. So if parents can really just sit down, communicate with their kids, allow them to express their feelings, not push them away to things like timeouts and isolate them, and not allowing them to feel, it can really improve their relationships with their kids so much. And I really want every parent to experience that and to have the best relationship with their children.
Well, it's been really nice talking with you. I've enjoyed it, and I know that we could talk for hours, I'm sure.
Yeah, it's been wonderful. Thank you, James.
Okay. Well, Cassandra, thank you again for your time. And for everyone else out there listening, we will catch you next time.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, James. I appreciate the time.